Well, good evening and welcome to this Facebook Live event. It's a delight to have you join with us tonight. My name's Katrina Lambert and I'm currently pastoring at New Hope Baptist Church in Melbourne. I'm also passionate about theological education and spiritual formation. Whitley College has been a significant place of my own spiritual formation and education, and I am now lucky enough to serve on the council of Whitley College. It's a pleasure tonight to be in conversation with Dr. Lynn Moracy. Welcome, Lynn. I wondered if you could just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are.
Hi, Katrina. Hi, everyone. My name is Lynn Moracy. I am at Whitley in the role of pastoral theology, and I look after subjects relating to pastoral ministry, pastoral care, anything to do with the pastoral theology side of ministry and life. My background is I've been about, it's showing my age now, but almost 40 years in pastoral ministry in some form or other, teaching for about 20 years in various Bible colleges. I'm a spiritual director, so I walk a lot with people and, companion them, a lot of pastors and leaders who kind of are perhaps working their way through a change of stage of life or ministry. And what else? I'm married, been married for nearly 40 years, got 2 adult kids and a dog, a spoodle that I'm also passionate about. And I'm a Collingwood supporter, but don't hold that against me.
Fantastic. Well, this is the second in a series of 3 conversations, 3 Facebook Live events hosted by Whitley College. And across each of these 3 conversations, we've taken up 3 different themes that explore 3 units that will be on offer at Whitley during semester 2 of this year. Tonight, our topic is transforming pastoral leadership. It's a topic that is vast and wide, but given the challenges of this particular moment that we're in, this worldwide pandemic, and the unprecedented change that people in pastoral ministry are facing, Lynn and I thought it would be good tonight to explore some of the challenges that pastoral leaders face. So tonight we want to participate with you in this conversation. Don't leave your questions to the end. If there's something in particular you'd like to explore, just put a comment down below and Lynn and I will be able to see those, and we hope to get to them. If we don't get to them all, please just be patient and receive our apologies. Lynn, I thought that we'd start by just getting you to respond to the question, what's your interest in pastoral leadership? Why is this particular subject so important to you?
Oh, I guess, the bottom line is I love people, and I love walking with people and helping people to really see where God is at work in their life. And I think when it comes to pastoral leadership, it's helping leaders to really come to a place where they feel grounded in who they are, where they feel grounded in their call, where they can get a bit of an understanding of their own journey, their own faith journey. I think formation is incredibly important. And in my own life, I look back over the various stages and the shifts and the changes that I've made in my own life and my own ministry. And I think, I just love to walk with other people and help them, in, I guess, discovering where they're at and where they're wanting to move. Yeah.
Great. You did your doctoral work under the supervision of Richard Raw at Fuller Theological Seminary, and you explored the themes of suffering and doubt and spiritual darkness. From your research, Lynn, what are the particular challenges for pastoral leaders that your research identified?
Yeah, that's a huge question. I think I spent a lot of time around John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila, the Dark Night of the Soul, and that stage in someone's life where God, it doesn't feel like God's love and God's grace, but it is that period in our lives where God removes the structures that have held us for so long, and we see God and our faith journey from a different perspective. Oftentimes it's, the dark night, it's a time that's obscured. It's a time of uncertainty, a time of darkness, a time when we really, a liminal space where we often don't know what's in front of us. All that we know is that where we have been, we can't keep going that way. It's almost like there's been a shift. We've walked through a door, we've walked through a doorway, and the door's closed behind us, and we know that what has been behind us has impacted us and has carried us, but we can't go back, but we don't know what's ahead of us. And so that space, that dark night, where we know that God is changing, God is moving, our image of God is changing, how we have known God in the past is changing. The old things that we used to do no longer work, but we don't know how to move forward. And it really is a time of waiting and a time of obscurity. And so I think helping leaders to navigate that stage is probably one of the things I'm most passionate about, because that's the point where so many leaders just feel like there's no point in going on. They don't understand what is happening, don't have the framework, the strategy to navigate it, perhaps don't even realize that it's a very critical part of our growth. And, we hit this space and just literally don't know how to move. And so I think one of the big things that I'm passionate about, especially through my doctoral work, is helping people to recognize when this is happening and giving them some strategies to move forward with it. Yeah.
So tell us about some of those strategies that you've found to be really useful for leaders in that space.
Yeah, well, Katrina, it's different for everybody. It really is different. There's not one size fits all. I think the thing is, whatever we have been doing in that first half of life tends to no longer work in the second half of life. So what I find is a lot of people that have been in very strong Pentecostal environments then shift to something that has more liturgy, and those that have been in liturgy tend to shift to something that's more extemporaneous. So it really does depend on the individual person, but I do think that things like engaging in contemplation, in contemplative prayer, re-engaging perhaps with the spiritual disciplines. As Protestants, we chuck them out a little bit. A lot of the things that who is it? She's got a Tickle. So Phyllis Tickle.
Phyllis, yes.
Phyllis Tickle says we have this spiritual amnesia as Protestants, and we forget the fact that the Catholic Church carried us for thousands of years, and those things that enriched the church we threw away and said we're no longer relevant. And I think we're rediscovering the value of things like the spiritual disciplines, silence, solitude, contemplative prayer, even spiritual direction. Those kind of things I think can be very helpful for pastors and leaders who are moving into a new stage, and a new stage of faith and leadership journey.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that it's not possible to define what the particular skills are that people need to navigate that season. It's just that they need some, and they're probably going to need ones that they don't currently have. Is that kind of what you're saying?
I think so. I mean, has that been your experience? What have you hit that? Have you found yourself hitting that space at all?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that there comes a point when pastoral ministry challenges you so deeply that it challenges your fundamental assumptions about a whole range of things about who God is, what the church is, what the role of a pastoral leader is, what the process of, really massive questions.
Yeah.
And so when you hit that, I think it's it's easy to become so disillusioned, so despondent and disappointed that at that point you have a choice. Well, I felt that I had a choice. Either it's a moment where you exit and you go, actually, it's not for me. There are some things here that are just so not working that I can't see a way through. Or it's a moment of transformation where the pain of that leads you to say, I need to find another way. And then that propels you into a journey of experimentation, really, because the way my way wasn't completely 100% clear. So there's a need to open yourself up to a whole range of things that you haven't opened yourself up before, as a way of navigating and experiencing and finding your way through to some different things.
Oh, I agree entirely. And they're big questions. And I would say that there's a third option. Some people will opt out. Some people will, break through and find a new way of doing life and ministry. But there are a group of people who what I say, they're the bouncers. They bounce back and they simply go, it's all too hard. It's all too hard. And so they just go back to doing things the way they've always done them, pushing down the emotion, pushing down the doubts, pushing down the questions, pushing down the disillusionment, and they shove it down really, really deep in the hope that it will go away and go through the motions. The problem is you can't do that for the long haul. And that is where I think a lot of pastors end up in burnout, because they're running on empty. They actually haven't had an opportunity to stop, to really engage with some of the big questions that are there, that are sort of starting to rise, which is God, God bringing to the surface things that God wants to deal with in our life, but feeling like it's too hard, it's too stressful, it's too painful, it's too scary, pushing it down and just refusing to engage with it, and just, pray more, listen to more worship music, put on some Hillsong and sing more. And I'm not saying those things aren't important, but when we come to a stage where God wants to dismantle some of the structures we've built up to protect ourselves that are actually stopping us from moving forward, it's painful, and those things don't work anymore. So yeah, I think we do one of those three things: we bounce back, we opt out, or we do the work that God's calling us to do, which is not easy.
And one of the challenges of doing that work is that it's not like you get a 12-month sabbatical to go away and to leave pastoral ministry to do that work. You're doing it in the midst of the work that you're already doing. So share with us what you notice about pastors on the other side of burnout, on the other side of disappointment or disillusionment. What are the helpful things that you notice pastors do who navigate that really difficult season well?
Oh, be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Often the standards, we spend so long in pastoral ministry trying to meet the needs and the expectations of everybody around us. And then when we hit a space where everyone is screaming at us to be something or do something, and there's an incongruence there for us, there's a dissonance that's happening on the inside where we just don't feel like we're in the same place anymore. Be kind to yourself. Take some time, even if it's a half a day a week, and see a spiritual director. Look after yourself a little. Take some time to really do that inner work. Self-awareness is the key to growth, and as long as we push stuff down, it's not helpful. And I think on the other side of burnout, that's really the big key, is to take some time to breathe, take some time to acknowledge that sometimes we just have to wait. Waiting is incredibly hard, especially in pastoral ministry where it's go, 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 and it's activity, activity, activity. So taking some time to just be still and sit with God for no other reason other than just to sit with a friend, I think being kind when in a place of burnout, I think it's incredibly important to just say I'm not doing well, and to acknowledge it and to take some time to breathe. Yeah, I think that's one of the big keys. What would be your experience?
I just noticed how I had to be an awful lot more intentional about structuring my life. And that if I didn't take the time to make time to do the things that that enabled me to be healthy in my life, and well, for example, on a daily basis, if I don't find some silence and solitude at the beginning of the day, if I don't journal, if I don't go for a walk, if I don't do those kinds of things on a daily basis, you can get away with it for a couple of days, but then you start to feel the cost. If on a weekly basis, I'm not having some kind of connection relationally with people outside of my role as pastor, if I'm not nurturing friendships, then I notice that pastoral ministry can at times begin to feel very lonely, particularly if you're in a sole pastorate or in a very small team. And I noticed that annually I've got to do some things too. Like I actually need a block of time. I need to go away for at least 2 weeks on a holiday. And so, you know, I've begun to get very boring and staid about those things. I'm not interested in diversity and, you know, changing all of that up all the time. I'm interested in consistency, because that's the thing that I've found to be really helpful over the long haul.
Yeah, I think my passion is really to help in the formation of pastoral leaders so that they don't get to burnout. You know, like I think there are some strategies that we can put in place that help to prepare us, you know, so that we don't ever get to the point where it's really all too much and we have to opt out. You know, like understanding even the fact that there will be stages when God will change and shift and dismantle things in our lives. That understanding helps when we do hit that space. But I think you know, putting into place some of the things that you've spoken about are incredibly important. And one of the things that I notice a lot with people that I work with in spiritual direction who are perhaps in burnout or are coming out of it the other end, the lack of peer relationships. A lot of pastoral ministries have upward relationships. Most have many downward relationships. But it's rare that you find a pastor in burnout that has good peer relationships, accountability, friendships, you know, just somebody that you can sit and have a coffee with, that you can go to a movie with. You know, a lot of pastors who find themselves really stuck are stuck because the only friendships they have are really around their ministry, and they're not people who see their hearts. Yeah.
So we've got a question from someone on Facebook, just wondering if we could speak about some of the challenges of this current period of isolation and virtual ministry that we're all attempting very quickly to, you know, to adjust to. And as we've just discovered yesterday, are going to, in Victoria, spend a significant amount of more time in. What are some of the challenges, Lynn, particular to this moment, that you see?
Oh gosh, don't you think a lot of it also has to do with personality? I think as an extrovert, I really struggle just with not being physically in the room with people. You know, not being able to feel the energy. Like, you know, I'm all about embodied theology, where we talk a lot about, you know, the importance of physicality and body in our spiritual walk, not just, you know, the whole idea of, you know, our spirit wafting around, but real embodied. And I think that comes from sharing with people and the energy that comes from being with people. So it is difficult. Physical exercise is very important. So I think getting out and about and walking, catching up with people on the phone as much as you can, you know, just breathing, meditation. I think for Pray As You Go it's an app on it's put out by the Jesuits. I'll see if I can bring it up, and it is absolutely fabulous. There's actually no picture there, but it's called Pray As You Go. It's a little blue app, and it has a 15-minute daily devotion, I guess. It's very, you know, heart oriented, and you know, if you're feeling like you just can't pick up the Bible, you know, if you're feeling like you can't do anything, this is a very lovely way to just with someone who has prepared a small devotion that is really, you know, heart-centered. So I really love that. And that's a little tip for you. Pray As You Go, it's called. It's a little blue app by the Jesuits.
I feel like in this season, I've been wrestling with a somewhat of a crisis of identity, both personally in terms of, well, what is now the role of a pastor when all of the usual patterns and practices of the church have been transformed, and also a crisis at the level of identity in the church. So, you know, this season is raising all kinds of questions about what is the purpose of the church and what is the purpose of our gathering. So it's opened up these really enormous questions. And I don't feel any sense of clarity about where all that's going to land. So one of the challenges for me in this season has been sitting with the uncertainty of all of that. Giving myself the freedom to fail, to conduct experiments and try different things and see how that goes. I felt personally really challenged to build some new skills, you know, in this space to communicate and connect with people. And I've just noticed that, you know, I've been a bit up and down in terms of my energy. You know, Zoom can be an extremely, you know, energy sapping environment if you're on it, you know, all day for many hours each day. So it's been really challenging, and not having the usual space that you have in the context of day-to-day relationships to process any of that.
Yes, yes, I agree 100%. And I think, you know, again, you know, giving yourself permission. I think sometimes we hold ourselves to this standard of, you know, having to have everything together. And if you switch onto social media and you know, every second body is putting up, you know, new podcasts and doing new courses and doing this and doing that, and it can be exhausting to look at. And if we're comparing ourselves to that and saying, well, you know, so-and-so lost 10 kilos. I think I found it. They lost it. And I think I found it. And, you know, the pressures that we put ourselves under to be who we think we should be, or be who we think other people think we should be. That's why I just am a passionate believer in just sitting and being still and getting in touch with that, that center of, you know, where spirit dwells, and just saying, I am enough, and this moment is enough. And reaching out to friends again, you know, calling friends, going for a walk with a friend. You can still walk with people, but not putting too much pressure on yourself to have to perform when really the world is in a, you know, it's a difficult place right now, and it is hard for us. So just acknowledging that, I think, is important.
Mm-hmm. Got a question also. Someone asks, thank you for using inclusive language for God. Is that something that's changed for you over time?
Oh, yes, definitely. I think my background, I was raised in a Baptist church, and I was very grateful for my upbringing, very grateful for the good sound biblical knowledge that I had. Then in my early 20s, we moved across to the Pentecostal church because I really felt like I wanted to be somewhere where there was more of an engagement with spirit. We've come the full circle now, and we're back in the Baptist, back in the Baptist church. So I think, now hang on, I've lost my train of thought completely. What did you ask me, Katrina?
So is the use of inclusive language something that's changed for you over time?
So I would say, you know, in my early years, it was very much God, he. But I'm a lifelong learner. And the more I studied, the more my eyes were opened up to the fact that God doesn't have gender, and that, you know, the terms for God, female terms for God, are just as important as the male terms for God, and the fact that we do need to be inclusive in our terminology, I guess. It makes a difference. I think, I don't know if you feel that, Katrina, but growing up, it used to really frustrate me the way all the language was male oriented. And I'm not a, you know, a rampant feminist. I still wear my bra. So, you know, like but I do strongly believe that using inclusive language helps people feel valued. And when I hear someone in the pulpit talk about sons and daughters, and or children, even, rather than even, you know, gender specific sons and daughters, but when we hear that kind of language, it just makes everyone feel included. So it has been, and I'm not, you know, I still slip up, please, or, you know, it's easy to slip up when you're in the habit of using, you know, certain pronouns, but you know, we're trying.
Yeah. Lynn, this is a question that connects to some of your thesis work. Lynn, during the dark seasons and through our encounter with other believers, it feels like God is unreal. So how do we reconnect with God, particularly when we can't trust in the God we used to believe deeply, because this God is so disconnected to the injustice of the world?
Yeah.
Very big question.
Yeah, but like actually quite a typical dark night of the spirit, dark night of the soul, dark night of the senses, quite a typical question. Because what happens is we spend our early Christian years, our early formative years, and we kind of know God like this, and we get to know God like this, and we think this is who God is. And then there comes a point where God says, actually, let me show you more of myself. And God turns and we go, hang on, I don't know this God at all. And we want to see what we used to see, and it's not there. And so it becomes very lonely, and it becomes quite scary, because there is a perceived lack of God's presence in our life. So what do we do? That's the question. We sit in the dark. We sit in the dark. So the imagery of the caterpillar and the cocoon and the butterfly, that is the imagery for the dark night of the soul. And we come into the chrysalis as a caterpillar, and then in that space we are dismantled and transformed into something different. But you can't rush the process, and there's nothing that little caterpillar can do. There's nothing. So trying desperately to pray more, or fasting. You know, I can remember when I was in this point, you know, I went on a 40-day fast, because I thought that's the answer. That's going to reconnect me with, you know, with God that I've known. That's going to do it. I'll do this 40-day fast. Or, you know, I did silent retreat after silent retreat, and all these different things that I did to try and regain this view of God, when God was saying, actually, I want you to know me like this now. There's something different. There's something about a different side of me that I want you to engage with. So it is waiting. It is sitting in the silence. It's doing whatever enriches you. So whatever space you connect with God, if that's through poetry, if it's through song, if it's through walking in nature, and allowing that period of time for God to come to you, rather than you trying to grab God. So it's a time of waiting and letting God unfold God's self to you. The responsibility is taken out of our hands. For years and years, we've known, if I do this and I do this and I do this, I will sense God's presence. And then God says, it's changing now. I'm showing you who's really in charge. And we have to just wait for God to touch us. My husband's bringing me a cup of tea. I'm sorry.
Well, it's a
sorry. Lost my train of thought because my husband was bringing me a cup of tea. Thank you.
It's a lovely thing. Another question, another pressure that leaders feel at this moment is to try and discern how best to do church, quote unquote, when we have a variety of people with different levels of confidence in or access to getting online. And just the pressure of trying to live up to the standards set by those who are incredibly skilled online and are able to produce great content for their congregations. Yes. How do we discern our way through that particular challenge, Lynn?
You probably would answer this better than me, Katrina, because you're on the ground in pastoral ministry. But the one thing I would say, I will hand over to you because I'm sure that you will be able to handle this question better, but is comparisons are the greatest killer of joy. Comparisons. I was speaking to a pastor the other day who actually he's coming to share with our in our course, and he does incredible rural ministry, like just amazing stuff with people that desperately need, you know, the compassion, the love of God, you know. And we were talking about this very thing, like how do you compare that to these big churches that have got these incredible bands and, you know, what they're doing? And I go, well, we don't. We be who we are. We just sit with Spirit and let Spirit show us who we are and just be who we are. That comparison is it kills us. And not everybody wants to be part of that big bizarre movement. Rah is what I was trying to say. Anyway, Katrina, you speak about this because you're on the ground.
Well, what I've noticed is that I think it's really important to get in touch with what your specific church community really values and to let whatever you do reflect that. So be who you are in the online space. I was in a small church for 10 years, and now I'm in a much larger church, and I'm very grateful to say that, in my current context, we've got a very skilled group of professionals who know what they're doing in this space. And so the production values are really high because of those skill sets. But that doesn't mean that we're let off the hook for doing the discernment work about what would be particularly useful for our community, and also recognizing that we have particular ways of being together when we gather in person that should be reflected in how we be together online. And also just knowing that the limitations of this moment, I think it's okay to accept that there are a whole range of people for whom, in various demographics and for various reasons, what we're doing online, regardless of how schmick it is from a production perspective, isn't going to connect with them for different reasons. And so we have to get creative and get specific about identifying who those people are and how we can find ways to continue to relate to them and to encourage them and to be together. So so that's some of what we've also been learning through this.
I mean, it is a huge challenge, and I think just being able to connect even with a phone call, or I've started actually writing some cards. I just thought, well, how nice to get something in the mail at a time like this. But just doing little bits and pieces that give you life. But I think the big key is just to know who you are and not to be pressured into trying to be or do something that is not in line with who you are. If you're a small fellowship and you've always functioned by being there for each other, then just do that. Don't try to put on some big professional show. Just get on Zoom and talk to each other the way we are talking to each other now.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. Well, I just wondered, Lynn, I just want to talk a little bit about the leadership in pastoral leadership, because I don't know about you, but I find that sometimes a vexing word and a vexing conversation. How do you begin to talk about what you think is at the heart of pastoral leadership of churches and faith communities?
Oh, well, there's the old saying, if you turn around, if there's no one following you, you're not a leader. So I guess, one of the first aspects of leadership is just who you are intrinsically, who I love the idea of Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, that whole paradigm of leadership, where she was a genuine lover of people, and she gathered a group of people that had a similar mission. They were all trying to go in one direction, and she walked with them as a team. I think good leaders surround themselves by good people, and they're not threatened by the skills of others. Good leaders gather around themselves people that are better at jobs than they are in order to form a good team. I think being authentic, again, the Wizard of Oz, no smoke and mirrors. You look at the big wizard, and at the end of the day, there was no substance. And really, Dorothy was the one that led that group of people, through hardships and helped them find their giftings and listened. Having a sense of humour. I think a sense of humour is very important. Being able to be flexible and move and creative. I don't know. Does that answer your question? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I just, it's this whole discussion, that I'm in touch with about the word leadership and the way in which, when we use that word, we import a whole paradigm from the marketplace into a pastoral context.
Yes, which is not helpful. Not helpful at all. Yeah.
Connected to that, someone asks, could you comment on transforming pastoral leadership in the context of the marketplace rather than within the four walls of the institutional church?
Yeah, sure. Yes. So the class is actually, I guess you're asking in terms of the class that we're talking about today, which is transforming pastoral leadership. So it is probably situated, a lot of the people that we have coming to share are pastoral leaders. However, my husband is in the building industry, and I always say he pastors a large church of unchurched people. And I think pastoral ministry happens wherever there are people that are in touch with other people. So whether you're in a work situation, a corporate environment, whether you're in a school, a university, wherever you come in, wherever your life intersects the life of somebody else is where our pastoral ministry takes place. So I would say that the skills that we're looking at in this particular unit of study are, leading change, managing conflict, what I'm trying to look through what they all are, leading multicultural congregations. So we're looking at real life case study situations where we're going to discuss, what resonates for you, what resistance is there for you, and examine these case studies, take them home, think about them, reflect on them ourselves, do some theological reflection, come back the next week, talk a bit more, and then unpack it again with the presenter. So I think what we're looking at will transfer regardless of whether you're inside the four walls of the church or just leadership principles in general.
I know that you're really passionate about theological reflection, Lynn, particularly for pastoral leaders. Can you just briefly explain to people who might not be familiar with that term what it is and how you see it being useful for pastoral leaders?
Well, again, I think in terms of people that I work with and do meet for spiritual direction, as well as just general, in my general work as a Bible college lecturer, is when we're in ministry, or whether that's inside the four walls or outside, our lives are very busy. We tend to skate across the surface, and we do what has to be done, and we have a lot of pressures, and we don't take time generally to sit and reflect on what we've done. So to take a moment in time and say, what happened there? Like, what happened in me? Throughout the day, we might have a time where we feel ourselves react to something, but then we move on. Or we feel a joy about something, but then we move on. Theological reflection stops and looks at those moments and says, where was God present in that moment? What was God doing in that moment? What was God calling me? What was Spirit calling me toward in that moment? What was I resisting in that moment? And we look at those things through the lens of theological reflection. So we'll look at, we take experience, and then we'll say, what does the tradition of our faith teach us about this? What does common sense teach us about this? What does the Bible teach us about this? Where is God in this? And we analyze, and we understand, and we explore, and we unpack. Are those enough words? And create space to really think about something and reflect about something and ruminate. And when we do that, it gives us a grounding and insight. Gives us insight. If we just keep trundling along, we just keep reacting to things, but we never know why. And so stopping, taking some time to reflect theologically, helps us grow as individuals, helps us grow as leaders, helps us grow as people. And we mature, and we become, we're able to gauge what's happening and measure our responses, respond rather than react, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got another question, picking up on the point that you made, Lynn, about the importance of leaders gathering other gifted people around them. The question's about, what's your advice for church leaders who are in a community where there's lots of gifted people, but there's not a common mission?
Oh, I think that's one of the roles of a senior leader, or certainly the leadership team, is to create a common vision. I mean, you can't, it's like herding cats otherwise, isn't it? Everyone wants to do their own thing. So there has to be a shared common vision and a shared common purpose. That really, I mean, I would say that it's impossible to really lead an organisation, a group, or the Wizard of Oz. They might have had different needs, but they had a joint purpose, which was to find what they needed to find from the great Oz. What do you think, Katrina?
I think that would be a very challenging ministry context to work in.
Yes.
That when you've got a team of gifted people going in different directions, that's a recipe for conflict. It's a recipe for a dispersal of people's effort and energy, and that just feels to me like it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. So I think one of the challenges in that is to really have to bring that issue to the surface, to engage in productive conflict where people can express their differing perceptions about what the mission is. And so that you can work through that through a series of conversations over time and establish, well, what is shared? Is there anything about these different perspectives that we have that's actually common, or are they diametrically opposed to one another? And for the things that are common, how might that form a basis for us to move forward? And I think too, it's also a personal discernment question. If the mission that this particular group of gifted people feel like God's calling them on isn't the mission that I feel like God's given to me, then that's a signal to engage in some theological reflection about whether or not this is the place and the people that God's calling me to minister alongside of.
Correct. You know, I would observe, without knowing background, that if that is a group of gifted people pulling in different directions, that there probably is a lack of leadership vision there. And having an opportunity to sit down as a team and say, you know, what is it that we are ultimately working towards together, it would be extremely important. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So do you have any good advice for pastoral leadership when you're in an interim ministry kind of a role?
Oh, no, I don't. You've probably been, I've never actually served as an interim minister. I have always worked on teams or, you know, led groups of people. So I've never stepped in for that little section. I imagine that. Have you done that, Katrina? Maybe.
No, I haven't personally done that, but I've noticed that the pastors that I've known who fulfill that role do some extraordinary work. And one of the things that they're really focused on is bringing a sense of clarity of identity to a faith community. So helping a faith community to understand their story, to understand who they have been, who they are now, and to connect with that question of where are we going together.
Yes, I think as an interim, what you do have the value of that someone who's been there a long time doesn't is fresh eyes. So you will come into an organisation, a place, a church, and you will see things in those first few months that you probably will never see again once you've been there a while, because it's like a fish who doesn't know that they're wet. And so you have an ideal opportunity really to be able to help the church or the group that you're in to really find their identity, to look at some of the strengths and some of the challenges in that organisation. As an interim, you probably have that opportunity more than somebody who needs to sustain for the long haul, perhaps. Yeah.
So Lynn, this unit called Transforming Pastoral Leadership, who would you say it's for? What kind of people would really benefit from this kind of, of a unit?
Well, I think anyone who is in any kind of leadership or ministry role. I mean, that's pretty broad, isn't it? I think if you're certainly inside the four walls of the church, then this would be invaluable for you, because we are having 5 presenters who will come, each of them for 2 weeks, and they are people who are experienced in their particular field. So I'm going to look here so I don't forget. We've got Mark Connor, who was the senior minister of City Life Church, which was, you know, a church of 9,000-10,000 people, and had hundreds of different groups, different multicultural groups, cultural groups. So he's going to be talking about what it is like to lead a multicultural organisation. He's doing 2 weeks. We have Cheryl McCallum, who was the senior minister at One Community Church, also the principal of Tabor Eastern College for many years. She's going to be talking about leading through conflict. We have Julie Hunt, who's a senior minister, who's going to be talking about gender, sexuality and power. That'll be a good one. Daniel Bullock, who's head of the Baptist Union, he's going to be coming and sharing leading change. And then we have Jeff Leslie, who's going to be talking about rural communities. And the way that the unit works is that they will bring a personal case study. They'll change names, of course, but they will bring a personal case study and share about an experience that highlights that particular topic. They'll share for an hour or so, and then we will have time to meet in small groups and just debrief a little bit on that particular case study. Then the next week we'll come back having done some reflective work ourselves at home, and what resonated for us, what did we resist, why did, and looking at our own reactions to what was shared. And then the presenter will come back in for the last half of the second week, and will be there to answer any questions and debrief. So anyone who has any interest in those areas of ministry, whether you're inside or outside the church, I think would have a great opportunity to learn from people that have already been there. And it's certainly not a course that offers any answers. It's not a theory course. I mean, we will talk about theory, but it's really very grounded in practice and applied learning. So it's we start with the experience, and then we move to what's the theory behind this, what's the practice behind this, and what's the reflective understanding, the theological reflection that undergirds it all. So really anyone that is interested in multicultural conflict, or gender, sexuality, power, change, rural communities, I think it gives us an opportunity to really have some good open discussions. And around that, of course, we'll talk about all the issues that those case studies raise for us, which will be diverse depending on who's in the class. Yeah.
Well, certainly all of those topics connect with my ministry. I mean, the rural one, I'm not in a rural context, but there are important things I imagine to translate into my own context. Certainly all of those others, multicultural ministry, gender, sexuality, power, conflict, those things are all part and parcel of the reality of pastors' lives at the moment. Yeah,
and I think just having some time to actually, I think that our growth is always, it has to be intentional. I think that if we just hope for the best that we'll grow, it doesn't necessarily happen. I think setting aside time to say, for these 3 hours a week, I'm going to actually read things that perhaps I wouldn't normally read. I'm going to listen to people I perhaps wouldn't normally listen to. I'm going to be exposed to some points of view that perhaps I won't agree with, but that's how we widen our perspectives. That's how we grow. The most ignorant person is the person that's only ever read one book, but they usually have the most to say. And often, I know for myself, the more study I've done, the more I realise what I don't know. The more I hang out with the faculty at Whitley, the more I realise that I know nothing. It's a matter of growing and learning and opening yourself up to something that you don't already have down pat.
Well, given the constraints of this moment, Lynn, the unit's going to be taught online. So there might be some people who are a little bit concerned about that. So do you just want to talk about what that will look and feel like for students?
Well, we tonight, I can't see your faces, whoever is listening in, but normally what we would do is have a gallery so that we would all be able to see each other's faces, and we do the very best that we can to provide a learning environment where people can share, where there's openness, where there's honesty, where there's transparency. We're able to break into small groups so that we can share and do some good theological reflection with one another without having to do it in a big group. So we'll do a bit of both. It will function, in a similar way to how we would function if we were together in a classroom. But unfortunately, because of the circumstances, it's done virtually. So I taught last semester a couple of units, and one of them was a pastoral care unit. And honestly, it really went very well. And we had a great opportunity to engage with each other. And it was much, I was really pleasantly surprised.
That's certainly been my experience, Lynn. I've noticed just in the forums that I've engaged in online that suddenly I'm able to connect to things that I wouldn't get a chance to connect to. And also there's something about this particular medium that doesn't preclude those rich, deep conversations. So if you're interested in joining Lynn and doing this particular unit, the semester starts on Monday, the 27th of July, and classes for this unit will be held from 6 until 9 p.m. on Tuesdays. And as Lynn just said, attendance will be via Zoom. So we have a special offer if you're interested in auditing this particular class. If you enrol before next Friday, that's 17th of July, the cost is $350 for the unit. And after that date, the cost will be $500 to audit. Or for those students who are already enrolled or wanting to enroll in an award, enrolments close on the 17th of July, and you should contact Whitley and the registrar to get your enrolment in. We encourage you to apply as soon as possible, and there'll be some links in the Facebook feed for some further information. And of course, you can always go to Whitley's website online for more details about the unit and just exactly what will be taught and all the details you need to make that happen. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been a delight to have you. Tune in next Wednesday when the third of Whitley's live Facebook events will be a conversation between Francesca Nuzzoli, pastoral theologian and psychotherapist and trauma care consultant, who will be in conversation with the Reverend Dr. Anne Malaby on the topic of pastoral care in suffering, grief and loss. Have a lovely evening, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks so much.